signal for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
I guess I'm bringing you in earlier than I was planning. I was. Hey guys, this is Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. For those of you that have not tuned in before, as you can see, my friend Brian is here. Quick, coffee's available and merchandise is available, and I have a subscribe star up and running. We, as in me, because I guess I'm the we now. We'd love your support for this to keep this going, and we're just going to get right to it because my friend Brian is an inner city activist, but he's not your quintessential inner city activist. He tends to lean a little bit conservative, which has gotten him a little bit of flack over the years because, well, as we know, to be an activist in the inner cities, especially in major metro areas like the Twin Cities or whatnot, you're supposed to toe a certain political orientation if you're not of a specific ethnic identity. And Brian doesn't tick off all the right boxes to be a conservative. So you've gotten yourself in a little bit of trouble with the populace at times, but you guys are gaining a stronghold up there, huh?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a battle, especially the last couple of years. It's definitely different. Not to say that the population as a whole isn't very welcoming to the conservative movement, but we get some roadblocks from the hard-leaning leftists, obviously, the defunders and whatnot. So trying to get the message out tends to be the biggest issue that we have. That and the lack of resources. A lot of times people actually come with questions, and a lot of people know and follow Laverne Turner. He can co-sign on this. And people come with questions, especially about candidates or certain things campaigns that are going on. And we just don't have the resources to point them in the right direction, or to be able to sit down with a group of people and talk to them about what we've got going on in a safe manner. And I'm sure a lot of campaigns have dealt with that, where you get the picketing and whatnot, the protesting. But it can be a little bit different when you're living right next door and walking down the street and doing day-to-day dealings with this, I would say, almost an anarchist kind of a crowd.
You can attest to the, well, first of all, Brian, tell everybody a little bit about who you are, how old you are, and how you got, how long you've been in the conservative movement and what got you involved.
First, I was born and raised in Minneapolis, just a couple blocks off of 38th in Chicago. So I know that area very, very well. I know the neighbors very, very well. Know most of the major players around that area. Graduated from Roosevelt High School along with Laverne Turner. We were actually in school at the same time, so we go back quite a bit of ways. And I was always known as the Republican, even in high school. I was always known as a Republican, and I guess when you always think constitutionally, and are always telling other people to think constitutionally, being pro law enforcement, pro military, you kind of stick out.
I don't know why.
Yeah, exactly. So, So it's not like it's anything new for people, as far as my personality goes. But because of the new element that has moved into the cities, and things have definitely changed. You've got a lot of outsiders who now aren't really outsiders anymore because they've been in the cities for a while. So things have changed, and that's the element that's making it hard. The main locals that have been there for a while, they're actually looking to hear the other side of the fence. They want something else to vote for. But because we're getting so shadow banned down there, it makes things so difficult. Um,
That's a real life shadow banning too. We're not talking like social media, YouTube and whatnot. Shadow banning, like you're literally getting like shadow banned down there. Like
yeah,
you guys,
literally,
yeah. So like you were doing a lot of work for Dennis Smith, who I've had on
yes,
here a couple of times, and Dennis got a lot of flack, and uh, but even like you guys would hand out literature, put stuff up, and it would disappear.
yes. Even I mean, I was on Lake Street doing lit drops. And it's actually kind of different the way the Zoomers do it. They'll actually more go for the QR code, which makes things a little bit easier. But I mean, I would have it. We had a table out and we were doing some fundraising for some other things at the same time. And I'd catch people come along and grab a stack of literature and walk 2 feet and toss it right into the dumpster. So you do have that kind of thing going on. We get constant threats. Um, I mean, as far as even Marvin Applewhite, who we work with a lot, a good friend of mine, good team member. They've stole his car and bashed it, completely totaled it out, broken into his vehicle multiple times, graffiti. But that is kind of part of the game, I guess, if you want to call it a game. Um, but we keep on pushing. We're still here, we're still standing. It gets pretty dangerous. I mean, you're ducking gunshots, whether you want to or not. Things happen. Um, so it's definitely a different era, a different time. Um, when we can't even have a function at a park without catching threats just because we're conservatives. Um, and sometimes it's actually from the same party. It's from our own party. So we've got that to deal with as well. So it's definitely interesting, but I think the biggest thing is what we could use is actually we need more resources down there. We need places where people can go and talk to not even necessarily the candidate, but maybe even just a representative of the candidate. So they can be more aware of what these campaigns have going on and what they stand for. Um, because
This
like,
picture that I'm sharing right now, this is legit. Just so people
yeah,
understand, this is not staged. This
no,
was an actual outreach event that you guys were doing that
yes,
included supervising young adults and youth doing cleanup. That
that is
you
correct.
had to actually have a crew out there armed to protect them.
Yes, that is correct.
In fact, I think this shirt right here says, "Please don't shoot. We're doing cleanup" or something to that
yeah,
effect.
yep, that's the don't shoot kids working. And that's
Yeah.
Marvin. And he's normally out on Lake Street at the light rail station and in front of he the anniversary of the third precinct. Um, the normal bad actors came out and graffitied the place up, and the next day he was literally on live going back and forth with these guys as he's removing the graffiti from third precinct. um Always down at the light rail station. Just an all-around good guy, good conservative guy. And even though he doesn't push the campaigns, it's by his actions. He likes to show by his actions. So it's people like that that we really got to get behind and support. Because even on Father's Day, he's down there in the of the worst communities feeding people for Father's Day. Um, so it there and he needs resources. He would love, I was just talking to him, he would love to know more. He's got people asking him questions, and he's calling me like, man, where should I direct them? And I'm like, man, that's a good question. Let's call Laverne. Call Laverne, put pressure on him. He calls, well, I've reached out to people, but I'm waiting for callbacks. And I definitely understand people.
Let's be honest. Like, the Republicans have given up. Not all of them, but the Republicans have given up. Guys like, Lacey and Dennis haven't. Mike Murphy made some inroads into the inner city. I mean, in particular, especially the inner city areas with the Hmong community.
Yeah.
There are some Republicans, but the ones who end up with the endorsements most of the time, they're just not making the effort. The focus is always on the soccer moms, which ultimately ends up going out to the suburbs, because we feel like we have to, for some reason, we have to keep appealing to soccer moms,
Right.
and the DFL. For those who are from out of Minnesota who are watching, my friend Judson, who's from, I think, way down south, like in Georgia, he's the DFL is the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Union. It's I'm gonna be doing a series on the history of the DFL in Minnesota, so people understand just how Marxist the history is of that party. But the DFL takes for granted that the black community, I hate that term, but let's just be honest, because it's this amorphous thing. They just assume the black community is going to vote for them. And, quite frankly, when you have someone of a stature of Ilhan Omar I think she's your district rep, right?
Yep.
So when you have that stature, because now, oh, look, she's an immigrant, she's Somali, and we know that old school black guys and gals don't necessarily affiliate with the Somali community, but they've been told she's a big deal, so they support her. And the Republicans aren't making any outreach. The DFL's taking the black community for granted, and the black community and the inner cities, especially North Minneapolis, Lake Street, and all that area, they're over here saying, somebody tell us why we should support you. Because, as everybody who really pays attention knows, that apart from the institution of welfare and all that other stuff, the strongest family unit for 200 years in the United States was the black family. And they want that back. They don't want to be dependents on the state anymore. They want that autonomy. They want to be successful, and nobody's taking them seriously. So when guys like you and Laverne and others come along, they're going to flock to you. And when you need resources, and people need to understand, when you're talking about resources, you're not saying give us money. You're saying help us with materials to educate these folks.
Yes. Yes. Money, money's great. It's always great, but honestly, the biggest thing, materials, manpower. Really, that's the biggest thing right now is material and manpower. People have questions. Money won't buy answers, education will. Being able to sit down with somebody to get, because I can tell them, but it's not the same when it's coming from me versus when it's coming from actual campaign. And
which is why Dennis was making inroads.
Yes. I mean, the fact that people could sit down, the fact that we had a conservative in North Minneapolis that was like, come on, sit down. And we're not just talking about politics. We're talking about everything in between, normal life. That was major for people, because even trying to get a hold of a DFLer, impossible. So for Dennis to come into Northside, that was just major.
And let's just be honest. When Dennis watches this, he will be disappointed if I don't make some sort of crack. But Dennis is like literally the whitest guy. I mean, when Dennis is campaigning in North Minneapolis, everybody says, "Oh, you're Dennis Smith."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like,
He sticks out. Yeah, he sticks out. But that's the thing. I think people might also be misunderstood, especially in North Minneapolis. Um, it's such a smelting pot.
yeah, it
You see a
for
little bit of
sure.
everybody,
Yeah.
you know. So it's not like somebody's not welcome. It's just that small element that gives us these
Yep.
problems that we really have a problem fighting. Um, and don't get me wrong, we're definitely fighters. We give them we we're we're giving them a run for their money. But it's the support that we need from the campaigns, the candidates, and it doesn't even have to be candidates or the campaigns, just conservatives in general. We need help. We need volunteers for certain things. We do a lot of cleanup projects. Just the fact of when we have the storms come through, going down there with our chainsaws and getting these trees out of people's yards. Um, that's the kind of thing we do to get into these neighborhoods, to get the conversation started. And I mean, when you come through and you help somebody get their yard cleaned up, no one's going to be mad at you at all. Um, so it's definitely the door is wide open, basically. So now it's basically up to the conservatives and the Republican Party to walk through that door. And we're going to hold it open as long as we can, and we're going to keep on pushing.
Well,
But we really do need some support down
here's one of the things, and you've known me for a little while.
there. Yes.
This, especially with my activism and stuff, as far as my media presence and whatnot. But I'm about accountability. I'm really about accountability. And lately, for me, a lot of the accountability has been directed towards the Republican Party here in Minnesota, because it's been doing some stuff that I'm
Yes.
not real pleased with.
Right.
But one of the things that when I was fortunate enough to be able to get into the convention on the last day, that Saturday, what I was hearing in speeches was there's a lot of ignoring happening. There's a lot of ignoring of the inner city, and there's a lot of ignoring of greater Minnesota. And so what I heard repeatedly from a lot of the people that would take to the platform to speak was things like, oh, we're going to bring crime down, which, okay, is great, but does that do much for greater Minnesota? And does that really address what the cause of the crime is? And like, bad people are bad people. When you commit a crime, you're at fault. I don't care how poor you are. I don't care what your ethnicity is. I don't care how oppressed you are. When
Agreed.
you commit a crime, you commit a crime, and you deserve to be held accountable for that. But when we say things like we're going to bring crime down in the Twin Cities, what we're talking about is cracking down, in other words, with far more arrests and more convictions. We're not really talking about what the answer to that problem is. We heard things like, we're gonna end the Met Council. Well, like, is that really okay? First of all, is the Met Council an issue for greater Minnesota? Two, who in the inner city who's living paycheck to paycheck, or hand to mouth, or dealing with the drive-by shootings, and like, literally innocent people dying and being wounded from that? What does any of the Met Council have to do with the guy who lives on Lake Street, whose business is constantly being robbed,
Right.
or burglarized, or
Exactly.
vandalized? Like, okay, great, you're going to do something about the Met Council. Well, because we do need to remove another layer of bureaucratic morass. But what's the answer to dealing with these actual issues that are touching people's lives in a very negative way, in a place like, I don't know all the neighborhoods up there, so I just keep going back to Lake Street because it's the one that stands out to me. It's one, or Dinkytown. You hear about, you know,
Yeah.
Dinkytown, which of course used to be, everybody wanted to go there. Now nobody wants to go there. And, like, okay, but what are you actually going to do? And
Right.
no one's addressing that. The law and order, and justice people aren't doing anything. And so, like, Laverne's here and watching, interacting. Laverne says most people vote Democrat because if the Democrats lose, they lose their personal income, and I am referring to black activist class, which is precisely, that you're gonna always vote for the person who promises to give you the most.
Yep.
When you're in that mindset. Obviously, there are exceptions to that. Jai's here. Jai says Brian and Laverne are the real deal. I love that meme you guys made when you're standing there. You're standing there with him, and what did you ask? What was the meme? Where's the DFL? And the response was,
yeah.
"Good question."
And that was actually a live action shot. That was not a pose shot. That was us standing on Lake Street.
I knew that, but it was just the caption was just it was perfect meme.
Yep.
Just a perfectly memeable moment. And
exactly.
I had Mr. Hansen on and one of his opponents, and I walked away really impressed with what he had to say, because I feel like he's actually going to step into that position as sheriff and actually do something, like
Absolutely.
and not just because he happens to be a black guy in that community, but because he actually gives a damn about that district, that region, because it affects everybody. Like, people who are suffering aren't, just the people in the suburbs where the crime is bleeding over, but the inner city folk, the north side, as Laverne pointed out, they're hurting more than anybody else.
Yes. Yes.
And nobody's doing anything.
Nobody's doing anything. There's an activist, and I'm not going to come on here and not mention Marcus X. Smith's name, because I'm not going to do it. But this is one person that, if there are people out there listening and they want to get in touch and they want to know from somebody who represents a pretty large field of people on the north side, including a lot of high profile crime victims, talk to him. Talk to Lisa Clemens. Talk to these groups. You might hear a lot of banter about violence interventionists. There's only one violence intervention group, and those are the police. Everybody else out there, we're just community activists. People complain about a lot about the money that's going to certain groups, and it's probably not really what you think it is, or a lot of what people might think it is. There is a lot of misallocated money, but the work that these groups do, unreplaceable. Dealing with a family who's looking at their son or daughter on the pavement while crime scene is there. You need people to be able to comfort these people. And I don't know how many people out there have actually dealt with a fresh victim. Like, it will have you on a whole nother kind of emotional level and thinking.
Absolutely.
So you have to pay attention to the victims. If I say anything or tell anybody anything, talk to the victims. They will tell you everything, because no one's really listening to them at all. So that's the biggest thing. You want to know how to stop crime? Talk to the victims first. And then we can move on from there, because they'll generally have a grasp on who's doing what. They've got information that they want to tell. And that's who we really need to start with them. Stop coddling the criminals, start protecting the victims.
Well, the thing that really floors me, and I'm all about police accountability. I mean, especially after the last couple of years, some of the stuff that I've seen. But that there again doesn't paint. I'm not to paint every person who puts on the uniform and the badge every day into a corner of being one of the bad guys. But there are certain things that do need to change.
Yeah.
But and that's for how they relate to everybody, not just the minority communities or whatnot, but just how a lot of them do relate to everybody. Because I got news for you. The individual, I'm not even going to mention his name, who was responsible for overseeing the death of George Floyd. I don't care who that would have been under his knee. It would have been white, black, Hispanic, Native. It doesn't matter. He would have done the same thing. He
Right.
would have done the same thing.
Right.
Um, what I want people to understand is that the majority of the victims, we talk about this constantly. The majority of the victims of inner city crime are minorities. They are suffering the most. And conservatives have a tendency to come unglued when we let the criminal class get off of serious charges because we're supposed to have empathy and compassion for them because gosh darn it, they don't know better, which I find just an absolutely atrocious thought process, to give them a pass because we've created, the society, and that's what the left says, is like, we created this, we made them criminals by treating them the way we have. um, I would say if anybody's made them a criminal, it's been your leftist ideology and policy for the last 60, 70 years. But
Absolutely.
worse, the people that they're victimizing are their own friends, or their own neighbors, their own community members. And we could talk about cracking down on crime, and I've said this already, but what are we doing for, as you were saying, for the victims? Because nothing will make a person conservative
Right.
faster than being victimized by a person who has been coddled by a system who says it's not your fault. It's the fault of everyone else but you. You just commit these crimes because you happen to be a minority who's been oppressed. So we're going to not deal with you the appropriate way. So then they turn around and victimize their own community, their own neighbors, their own ethnicity, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And their neighbors, their victims, are going, someone help us. No, we don't need more money. We need someone to come in here and help us to not be victimized by our own people anymore.
Exactly.
And that's what they're waiting on. That's why
Yeah.
Dennis was making inroads.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I mean, and it's not like you get victimized just one time. Person robs you, they're going to make sure that you don't say nothing. They're probably going to come back and do it again and do it again. So it's not like it's a one-time thing. I know people whose family members were murdered, and they're getting threats constantly, text messages, this and that, like, hey, we're watching you. So that's what so so that's what victims that are dealing with, and even witnesses are dealing with. So when you have one that's coming forward and talking, everybody should stop and listen, because it's really actually pretty rare. And that's why you've got media always looking for, mainstream media looking for people, victims of, say, carjackings, to come forward and talk about it. Because most people don't want to, because they're scared. And I completely understand why. Because you will get retaliated against multiple times. So it's definitely it's a bad situation. Um, but the first thing we got to do is start listening to the community members that are screaming and yelling, especially these victims. Um, because once we start doing that, I think we'll start gaining ground with the crime, and actually getting towards the source of the crime. Because once they have no victims, there's no one to victimize. We're going to stop crime. We're going to put a dent in it at the very least. So that's kind of where I feel that we need to start. And definitely got to talk to these neighborhood representatives. Each neighborhood is different by block, intersection by intersection basis. I mean, folks can tell you who's where, who's doing what their name is, and who's doing the shooting. But we gotta listen to them and go talk to them. So
Not only do you have to listen and talk to him, you have to take action on the
Yes.
actionable testimony and information that they're giving.
Absolutely.
And then also, I hate the reminder that we constantly are getting these days, like, from people, because sadly it's true. The Supreme Court has ruled, well, law enforcement's not obligated to protect you. They're literally not, even though every one of those vehicles that you see drive through a neighborhood says to protect and serve.
Right.
And when you have a group of people who are being constantly victimized by their own people, at some point, someone has to step in and say, no, we are going to protect. We are
Right.
going to serve.
Right.
And and as you know, Jai would tell us, the response times in the Twin Cities, but especially for Minneapolis and in North Side, are 25 to 35 minutes minimum on a crime. And I know there's some blame there with the defund movement, because it did cause a lot. I had this conversation with someone today. The defund the police movement in the Twin Cities didn't really defund anybody. It just shifted money around
Right.
to pad the pockets of pet projects.
Right.
But a lot of the cops that left didn't leave because the money wasn't there. They left because they were getting told they were the problem. And you know what? Maybe some of them were. Maybe some of them were, but a lot of them were like, I'm not sticking around for this anymore. I'm sick and tired of not being able to help people.
Yeah.
Because these are the guys and gals that would help, but we're getting told to not intervene and getting told to to not arrest, or if you do arrest, there's not going to be any prosecution on this, and not going to be sooner or later you're going to be like, then why am I doing this? Then
Exactly.
and so there again, are there some legitimate critiques for law enforcement? Absolutely. There are definitely critiques and conversations that need to be had.
Right.
But you don't fix the problem by destroying the one outlet there is for tamping down on that problem. And people have got to understand that it's a first line of defense for the folks on the north side. And they feel abandoned because, quite frankly, they have been. But they haven't been abandoned by the blue.
No.
They've been abandoned by their mayor, by their city council, by the people that make the decisions, because they've decided things like, violence interventionists, which, by the way, didn't they just disband that? Didn't they close that program down because it wasn't, or no, the gal who was running it
Yeah.
is gone now. Yeah.
Yep, she left. That's that. We're still trying to figure out that whole violence prevention office. Don't know exactly what their main goal is, but I do know that a lot of people are taking the fall for City Hall's actions or lack of actions. That
Prosecution, Hennepin County prosecutors,
oh,
are, like they're the reason that they're emboldening the people who are victimizing the people they say that they're helping.
Absolutely.
And these are not, and a lot of these, and I know you know this, but you talk to a lot of people. These people aren't here. They're not from here. They're not us. They're not our people. They're coming from other places. They're coming up from places like Chicago. They're coming over from places like Milwaukee. These aren't homegrown Minneapolis people. These are quite frankly thugs that couldn't cut it in more thuggish places.
Exactly. Carpetbaggers.
Yeah. Well, that's a different application of the word carpetbagger, bro. But that's, you want to end gang violence, just start calling them carpetbaggers. They won't know how to respond.
Because that's basically what it is. That's the way I see it. There's so much outside influence, and all the grassroots. Just like the grassroots movements on the conservative side, they just get buried by these elitists, the ones that come in with money, whatever it is. But bottom line is, all the natives are suffering in the end. A lot of influx out of Chicago and obviously Milwaukee and everywhere else, because Minneapolis is easy pickings. It's easy pickings.
Well, you get everything here. You look at what happened when Wisconsin went to a lifetime cap on certain social programs.
Yep.
when Minnesota literally stood here, especially with the urban areas, and said, "Come on over. We don't have any of those things."
Yep. Yep.
And
Absolutely.
and now when you've got, I mean, what's the most recent now? We're not going to prosecute. The one that just came out here a few weeks ago was the announcement that they're not going to prosecute under a certain level of even felony. It I'm just like,
I mean, do they prosecute any felony right now? I mean, nothing surprises me anymore. I mean, you got guys maybe
yeah,
get
I know,
12
I
months
know.
for shooting somebody. So it's what's going on? I don't know.
Or they don't get anything because they're not investigating because they don't have the manpower, and you can only work people to the bone so long before they say I'm done with that too. Um,
Yep.
the vast majority of the people that you're dealing with on a weekly basis when you're out, I mean, because you have a life in the sense that you work. You know, it's not like you're getting paid to do these things, and I don't believe Laverne is either.
Nope.
Um,
Nope.
but you when you're out doing your activism and you're out there trying to show people that there is a way, are you are you running into outsiders, carpetbaggers from the more political activist position
Um.
who are
Absolutely.
on the left, who are walking up trying to figure out a way to disparage what you're doing but don't really know how?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I've probably come across that more in Uptown. A lot of that in Uptown. Um, you kind of start getting a clue to what's going on because most people are pretty receptive. And then you'll kind of notice the questions that they're asking you or trying to almost like they're trying to gaslight you into to saying something or to starting to provoking a certain conversation. Um, so that's definitely an issue. Definitely an issue. You have to watch out when you book venues. They will sabotage your venues.
Well,
You'll
they
get
did that to Dennis.
oh yeah, yes, absolutely. Dennis, I
But
can name
that came from somebody allegedly in the GOP.
yes, 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 but it happens on both sides, and
Right.
that's
But so Dennis' situation was a community outreach event saying thank you to all the people that had supported him on the north side, and he
right,
had to shut that down for credible threats.
exactly, yes. And that that really didn't go over too well on the north side. They're used to dealing with things a little bit different. And I definitely commend Dennis for doing what he did because obviously when there's a threat, you take every threat seriously, especially when the community's been traumatized over and over again. But in all reality, I think it actually put fire under people to really want to know
What's
about
going on?
the conservative brand, the brand of conservatism that we're trying to push. Um, because we're probably a little bit, I wouldn't say more modern because we're just constitutional. Treat everybody the same, regardless of race, religion, gender. It's pretty easy stuff. Be fair. Equal playing board. That's all anyone's asking
I
for.
don't think that's a moderate position. I just think that's a pretty traditional conservative position,
Exactly.
and I'm a
And that was,
constitutional conservative with social conservative leanings and some libertarian perspective on things. Um, but I'm looking around and I'm going, what that community needs is people like you and me and Laverne and others who are out here going, well, let's just be honest. Like we don't. I'm going to get myself in trouble. Um, we don't need some of these big name I don't want to say supposedly. We don't need some of these big name, well known conservative black activists who have a big platform that everybody watches and is, especially white conservative folk who go, oh hey, well listen, she has this voice or he has this voice. What we need are actual homegrown conservative black folk stepping up and saying, "Yeah, I'm a conservative, and no, I'm not going to side with you on this issue because we both happen to be black, and you think I should vote for this person because they're promising to give us more. I don't want any more."
Right.
And
Right.
and so what you're running into, I can only I'm gonna make a guess. I'll probably make a fool out of myself, but I would bet outside of some of the gang influence, some of the people that hate you the most are probably white leftist.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I can think of a somebody who's on a DFL SD. Um, the and I mean, who's put out literature, literally leaflets around town, um, about people. And they're and we yeah. So absolutely. I've had it where we're doing some cleanup and we run into a group of them, and they start out kind of, hey, you know, da da da, appreciate, yeah. Then they start, you can kind of feel them gearing up, and they start getting on you about why are you taking down the F12 messages and this and that, that's art, this and that, and you're kind of like, hey, you know, it is, you know, da da da, we're cleaning up this and that, and then they'll start really getting on you. Once they figure out that they can't move you like that, then that's when the racial slurs will start being flung out.
Yeah,
And
I want people to understand. You get left wing, predominantly white folk coming into a predominantly inner city neighborhood, getting on black folk and calling them racial epithets because they're taking action, but they're not doing it as leftists. So therefore, it's okay to call you racially inflammatory names.
I can't figure it out. Can't figure it out. We had, I know, I think it was about a couple of weeks ago. There was a businessman, black businessman who had his truck burnt down by Antifa because he didn't agree with the defund the police movement. I don't know what the argument started over, but they burnt his truck down. So I mean, 38th in Chicago, Agape, they are in a turf war over that corner.
Right, and let's be honest, the Antifa, you know, there's maybe a smattering or a handful of minority people in Antifa in the Twin Cities area, but the vast majority of them are couch sleeping, parent basement dwelling
Yep.
malcontents.
Yep.
Who literally have nothing better to do with their time than to run around and burn down the vehicles of a black guy in the name of lifting up the black voice. So
there it is. There it is. So it's it's something else. I tell you what, you know, there's yeah, it's definitely different. And you know, there's a documentary that's supposedly coming out soon that somebody made. And I'm kind of worried about it because I don't know the content, I guess the content and the reason for the said documentary. I feel that it actually might put us back a few steps from the work that we've done over the last couple of years down there. And I'm actually kind of worried about that.
well, give me an idea what you mean by it might put you back, because I think that will help people to understand.
There's, after the unrest, there's a healing process. Everybody just wants to heal. We've got to move forward. And everybody in that community will tell you, why are you holding us back in 2020? We're still sitting here in May of 2020. Why? We're trying to move forward. Everybody keeps on holding us back. Especially when the pot gets stirred and the information that people are going on is either not always there, or they'll only put a piece of it in there, or what they want people to hear. So I was actually kind of surprised when I heard about this documentary. First of all, I was surprised. I was like, man, how come they can go down there and stand down there without 5-10 guys with AR-15s and be okay? I'm curious about that because I can't do it. But whatever. But some of the line of questions from some of the little snippets, I just had to shake my head. Because like I seen a interview with Mike and Billy at Cup Foods. You know, these are guys that I grew up with. I begged them for a job when I was 10 years old. Let me come work for you at Cup Foods. And just the line of questioning, like somebody needs to ask these guys what it was like when they actually tried to open up that store and what they've actually gone through and what's led up to that point where it's gotten that bad, because no one has ever asked them that yet. And I'm dying for that story to come out because, man, those guys actually, that store went through hell just trying to do business. That corner was divided by religion in the 80s tremendously. And there was
that during the Muslim insurgents in that neighborhood, or was it divided more along the lines of uh, Christian versus
Christian,
okay.
kind of thing. You know, there was one religion there that was very anti Islam. Who, I mean, they just railed that store. I mean, railed it. But they also railed into the Baptist Church, Worldwide Church, which they actually kind of weaponized the police, which was a huge thing in the 80s. I mean, that congregation could not pull out of the parking lot on a Sunday without getting pulled over. I mean, every last patron of that church, and it was ridiculous. So there's a lot of battles on that corner that have never been told. And it honestly comes down to politics and religion.
OG Snoop just corrected me and said there weren't any Muslims in that neighborhood in the 80s. I was not aware of that because I did know that Nation of Islam was making some inroads in the inner cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul in the 80s and into the early 90s. So I thought maybe it had something to do with that.
You know, I mean,
I know the Black Hebrew Israelites also like to have a big presence up in that neighborhood, neck of the woods too.
Absolutely. You know, I've always known them to be there my whole life. I mean, I grew up with friends who are now clergy in those religions, you know. So they've always been there. I mean, Cup Foods has got a mosque in the basement. And Cup Foods came in 87, 88, I believe. So I mean, there was enough people there for them to have a mosque. I mean, it's always been a very Sundays. I mean, it was always about church on that corner on Sundays.
Somebody was having some sort of church.
Oh, I mean, literally on a Sunday, everybody's getting out, and that was part of the problem.
When my black friend says we're having church up in here, that's what it meant.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, literally, it was the whole 2-3 block radius. It was all church folks on a Sunday, you know.
All my white friends are like, and we will be now conducting a worship service in the proximity. That's how we say it. So, which is sad. Which is sad to think that we shifted warfare between differing denominations to maybe a difference between the Nation of Islam and and even as virulent and potentially violent as the Nation of Islam. I mean, we have to just understand they will murder their own. Look what they did to Malcolm X when he started to kind of come out and say, "Whoa, wait a minute, we're a little bit too radical." But then you have the rise of BHI, Black Hebrew Israelites, who come out and recruit using that violent language. And I've had friends who do street ministry, street preaching, who have run into them in that area, who are they're gonna get run off real fast because it's really hard to compete with people who are that stringent. To go from that kind of fighting to then an even more of an insurgence of gang violence, which was, I know, probably bad to some degree in the 80s, but not like it has become with the divisiveness of gang turf in that area. And I have talked to some people who said, look, it maybe isn't like LA or New York, but it is present up here, and they fight over every square inch of land.
Yes.
And
Yep.
you've even said it yourself that sometimes it's block to block, corner to corner.
Yep. Absolutely. You can go on one corner, and it's just crazy. You can go one block over, quiet. So like I said, it's block by block, street by street. Um, and that's the thing. You have to. You're gonna have to deal with everybody from every walk of life to make it work.
Do you see that the majority of the people up there are really just, they're lost? They're like, how do we like, because a lot of people, I've there again, I've listened to testimonies. People like, if I could get out of this neighborhood, I would, but I don't have anywhere else to go. And
Right.
some people are like, I've lived here my whole life. I grew up here. Why do I need to leave?
Right.
And
Yep.
is politics can't fix this. There has to be a cultural change in the sense of how we address these issues.
Exactly.
But a
Exactly.
politician can come in and say culturally, whether we're the same ethnicity or not, culturally we can align and identify with each other, and really kind of come down to it. I can be a conservative and stand alongside a conservative Muslim. I can be a conservative and stand alongside a Hispanic Roman Catholic who is a conservative, or a native. Like, I have my friend Raul Estrada. I'm sure you know who Raul is. You know, Raul's another asset to the conservative movement with his activism and reaching out to the native communities and the Hispanic communities. But I can stand alongside, and he is not a Christian. But I can stand on a platform and and take up that fight with him.
Mm-hmm.
And it it's going to take more than a Dennis Smith.
Right.
It's going to take more than somebody who's running for governor. It's going to
Absolutely.
take a lot of people in that neighborhood
Yep.
feeling like they've got alliances and allies, not
Yes.
only in their own community, but out of their community, out into the suburbs, out into greater Minnesota, who
Yes.
are literally voting not just because, well, I want gas prices to go down, but I really want culturally someone to step in and say, we're going to unite behind a conservative cause that is going to be better for everyone in the state and not just a particular sector.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And that's the thing. Just if greater Minnesota were to come into the cities on a regular basis just to show support, um, I can't even tell you how far that would go. And it's noticeable. Last year, when we had that issue with, for some reason, we were getting a lot of our children were being shot. We had 3 children shot in the head. Um, and that you could tell that moved some people. You could tell that there was a lot of greater Minnesota in North Minneapolis that day. When there was we were having some prayer vigils at the hospital, you could see it. And people were talking about it like, man, I've never seen this many outsiders in Minneapolis ever. And it was great. It was phenomenal. And I think the reception that they were getting wasn't what they thought. I mean, people were like, "Man, thank you for coming down here. I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for coming down and hanging these flyers and just hanging out with us." Um, because it gave them hope that people were listening, that people do care, and that they're not just people aren't just in the cities and they're on their own. Because that's what it feels like. Like everybody, you're on your own. I mean, you call the cops, they're not coming, and if they do come, they got to tell you, "Hey, we can't do anything. I'm sorry." It's those political handcuffs. And for all the anybody out there, rule, man, get these political handcuffs off our officers, decentralize so they can start working with the communities instead of having to listen to this 1 or 2 people who've got this reimagined idea of the way they should be operating the streets. Like I said, it's a block by block basis. Everything is different. and I know I can tell MPDs they're working their ass off to get that done. Definitely a lot more work that's going on between community members and police down there, just to make sure that the lines of communication are open, because that's the biggest problem we're having. Communication. We have no communication, no resources.
Let me let me ask this. We've danced around the police issue a little bit, and one of the not really danced around it. We've kind of like danced all over it a couple of times, but one of the one of the things we hear all the time is we need more, more representatives from this community in the community. In other words, the leftists mean we need more black cops. Do you think more black cops in the north side is really the answer? Because to me that almost seems counterintuitive. The only person that can police a black person is another black person. To me that seems really like and countercultural to everything we've been told for years. Or is there a validity to it? Do we need someone who has grown up in that neighborhood to get into that law enforcement community and into that career field and stay there and police his own community?
I definitely don't think it's about race. It's just about a person has to want to engage and kind of want to be able to know who's who, but at the same time, when you don't have time to engage, a good cop is a good cop. It's just like a good neighbor is a good neighbor. I definitely don't see it being about color, at all. I mean, when you still look at it, what is it? 60% of Minneapolis is still white. So it's not like Minneapolis or even North Side is only 20% black. So it's not like all the North Side is black. Like literally color has nothing to do with it. It's just about getting these political handcuffs off these officers so they can engage in the community the way they need to. When they roll up to certain situations and calls, and they have to tell the caller that this is a civil issue, I can't do anything about it. There's a lot of these so-called civil issues are not civil issues. But there's so many things and policies that stop police from engaging with people the way that they need to be. So I definitely think before I can even put blame on police, we got to check the policies that they got to follow, because they're definitely counterindicative of what we're trying to do. That's for sure.
What kind of I don't know if visiting is the right word. To my I've got a pretty decent base in the Twin Cities, but I also have a pretty decent base outside of the Twin Cities. What can Greater Minnesota, if we picked a weekend and people don't have to like take out a third or fourth mortgage on their property to put gas in to get there right now. Like right now, the light rail to Rochester is starting to look really good.
Man, is it though? Yeah, that one might be heroin free still.
Right. But we pick a weekend, and we're all gonna get together, and we're gonna meet with Laverne and Brian, and we're gonna come up and we're gonna do stuff. What can they do? Is it just coming up and walking through the neighborhood and talking to people? Is it coming up with work gloves on and taking part in graffiti removal? What is it? Because there's that quintessential idea, and we see it frequently, especially within Christianity, of, oh, I'm going on a missions trip. Well, oh yeah, what are you doing? Well, we're going to go and we're going to dig wells in Honduras. Oh yeah, how long are you going to do that? Well, we're going to dig wells for a day, and then we're going to spend 5 days at the beach, calling it a missions trip. So what, in there again, that's predominantly like a white evangelical thing, because we got our missions on, right? Um, but what does it look like? Does it it does it mean coming up and cleaning up a vacant lot that's been, trashed? Is it mean just getting together for a block party? I mean, because I'm
Hey,
down. You go to bro, you want to barbecue and maybe
yeah,
throw some
we pretty
you
much do all of that.
you
We
I'm
do
down. I can take part in a barbecue. Like,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, any of that. I mean, from um, you know, we do cleanup days. We've got there's a group, Minnesota Clean Streets. It's on a Facebook group where they'll actually post cleanups. Who's got what cleanups, who's doing it where. So that's a great group to keep track of. But absolutely, just come on up. Gloves. If we're having a cookout, come cook out. Sometimes, um, anything. It doesn't even have to be anything specific going on. If people just want to come up just to hang out and talk and fire up the grill, or go walk around Lake Calhoun with a group of people and just talk about what's going on, man, people would love that. Everybody's just looking for something to do. Especially Minneapolis, where it costs $2,000 to get a permit to use the park. So that's why you'll probably see a lot of people not using the parks. But I would say just keep track of the events. Definitely keep track of the events, because there's a lot of neighborhood events going on. The Northside Flow Festival is going to be coming up here. That's a really good event. Hopefully the Uptown Art Fair will be kicking off. Just get used to come up to the cities, talk to people. That's the best thing you can do. Talk to people. Get a hold of one of us, Laverne, me, Clean Streets, Marcus X. Like I said, he's always willing to help anybody and coordinate people in the right direction if they're looking for something to do inside the community. He's a great person to network with. Even Lisa Clemens, all these groups, talk to them. They're always looking for volunteers. They will put you where you need to be, and with the right people who want to know more and communicate more. Um, Loretta and Claretta Arredondo, the twins, great people. Get in contact with them. They'd be more than happy to willing to talk with you and see what's going on. There's so many good people. Any one of these activists, even though Cortez Rice, a lot of people might hate him, but he's a really good guy to sit down and talk with. He's not what you see on media with all the yelling and this and that. They tend to capture the good moments, but even though he might be on the other side of the fence from our thinking, you still want to sit down and talk to people, and just so you can get an understanding of where they're
well,
coming
we have
from.
to be. The conservatives have to be better about that. The
Yeah,
conservatives have got to get better about that, because the left is never going to do it.
right. We've got to listen. Just listen. Let them speak. Acknowledge what they're saying. You'll find common ground. With everybody, you'll always find common ground, especially right now when safety is such an important issue. No one's ever going to say we don't need safety. No one will say that. So the big conversation is how do we get there so we can move forward, so we can't argue about the regular politics. Um, but safety,
Laverne says all of that, but also a long-term relationship and a plan to establish that kind of outreach. And I think that's, once again, one of the biggest problems is that people can be down for a work day, once or twice a year, but the idea of establishing that kind of relationship is just, I mean, it's let's be honest, white, black, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. It's just a lot of work to show up and in into a neighborhood where you don't know anybody and trying to and establish that relationship. But
and
it,
especially
it
right
it's
now with the fuel prices, it's
right.
hard.
Yeah. But it's also it's more than that. It's getting that relationship going. It's finding a person, talking to them, exchanging contact information. and saying, "Hey, I came up to your neck of the woods, so now you're going to come down to my neck of the woods. We're going to throw a party down here, or you can come hang out on the farm for the weekend with us, or whatever it is." That's establishing that relationship. Nobody's asking Greater Minnesota to turn it into a one-way street where you have to be the only one investing, because that's the thing with a relationship and with outreach is it's two-way. It's a two-way street. It should be. But I don't think anybody who's really invested is going to say, "Oh no, I can, I can't invest in you unless you're only coming to me."
Right, right, and
Heck,
and
we got
that's
to get Brian out of the cities once in a while. That's what we got.
oh, I get out. Trust me. Oh, I get out of the cities. That I do. And that's the thing. And people absolutely would love to get out of the cities and experience different experience, because that's what life is about, is experience different things. Getting people into the outdoors. They're living in a concrete jungle, and I can't tell you how many people I've already promised, yeah, I'm gonna get you out on the boat and we're gonna go four-wheeling this, that, and the third. So they absolutely do. But like you said, those relationships have to be developed. People in the cities, there are a lot of people in the inner cities, they don't know anybody in Greater Minnesota. So those connections that need to be made. And Laverne's right, it has to be on long term. It can't just be for an election cycle.
Well, if you're only doing it because you're trying to convince black folk or inner city folk to vote conservative, then you might as well just be a leftist.
Exactly, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And it has to be, and it should be. There should be no reason why, and I guess that's probably my big question, is how come Republicans don't have any kind of, nothing's really established in Minneapolis or St. Paul.
Well, it is just not in the right areas. Like there are certain segments of Minneapolis, and there are certain segments of St. Paul. Because let's
Yes.
be honest, there's a segment of the Republican Party that's really not any different than the DFL as a whole. They want to go where the money is, and if you're in the inner city, if you're on the north side, there might be a few wealthy folk up there, in certain enclaves of neighborhoods. But for the most part, it doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. There's just no money in that, and
Right.
and that's why the DFL just takes for granted that the north side is going to vote for them, but they don't spend any time doing any outreach because they're not getting their campaign coffers refilled, and the Republicans have been told, you're never going to win this district, you're never going to win this neighborhood, so why even bother reaching out to them when
Yeah.
when almost every single campaign outreach event you have almost always ends up in some sort of pitch for, well, I really want to help you, but if you want me to help you, you have to help me get elected, and the way to get me elected is for you to show up, go to my website, and hit that donate button.
Yep. Yep.
And while you're at it, everybody head over to my subscribes. No, I'm kidding.
Exactly. And that's the thing, the lack of conservatives on the ballot in those cities, like we should be pushing more, we should be supporting more conservative candidates down there. And especially if we get one on the ballot, I would think it should be all hands on deck. And that just doesn't seem to be the case. And that's something that I would like to see changed. The DFL needs to fight for that city. We got to make them fight for that city. We've just been giving it to them when there's no one else on the ballot to vote for, but a DFLer.
But that's what the Minnesota GOP is notorious for. That Lacey Johnson stood on the platform of the convention and called him out, and he didn't call him racist. He just said, "You guys are doing what you always do."
Yep.
You're like, there was literally an opportunity to have two different conservative folk, Lacey Johnson as a lieutenant governor, or Neil Shaw as a minority guy who, yeah, he's not from Minneapolis, but literally had the opportunity to say, look, what we nominated we nominated a white guy with a conservative black guy as his running mate, or we nominated a conservative brown skinned guy. Neil even joked about it. And
And you know,
when it became obvious that the one black guy that the party was leaning towards was the spoiler who has had nothing to do with the inner city
yep,
ever,
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 ever, ever, ever.
it,
Um,
we can't say it enough. Um,
yep, yeah,
and Lacey stands up and says the very definition of insanity. He said, I'm paraphrasing him, said the very definition of insanity is what you and the GOP in Minnesota are doing constantly. You keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and you don't win, and this is why.
yep,
And everybody got mad because he's accusing us of being racist. No, he's literally telling you you could win the inner city, but you're not putting any effort into it because you won't go with the person who can win you the inner city.
yep, yep, exactly. And I don't know if the GOP or how or the campaign affiliates, people who are affiliated with the campaigns and working campaigns, if they're actually paying attention to what Democratic voters are talking about and the and what their chatter is. But there was a lot of left-leaning people that really wanted Neil to be nominated. Like I was actually pretty shocked, and I didn't even know this until he didn't get the nomination. And their Facebook page was like, "Oh man, I was really hoping Neil was going to get it. Oh man, da da da, I really like that guy." And I was kind of like, "Oh, I guess." So you
No,
know,
and,
we
and Neil is not a leftist by any
no,
stretch of the imagination.
no,
I don't want people to hear that and think, well, leftists must think Neil's a no. Neil was not
no.
Neil sat on my show for 2 hours and
Yes,
proved his conservative credentials.
yes, yes. So with the like literally Neil really appealed to the demographic who we're trying to win over. Um, so we've got the Republican Party's got to try to figure that out. Because just because we nominate one way, or the party, I should say, nominates one way, it's not always right. I mean, Neil probably had a better chance than anybody, honestly, and we didn't know until after the fact. Now, if we'd have pushed this candidate, if we'd have pushed all of our candidates out there and got the feedback from people before this happened, before the nomination, I definitely think that would have probably changed the vote and the outcome. But we're not pushing our candidates before we nominate. I mean, we've got nominated candidates and we're still not pushing them out there. People still don't know. There's a lot of people in the inner city who don't know who Jim Schultz is. They have no idea who he is. And I say, yeah, Jim Schultz, and they're like, who's Jim Schultz? I'm like, well, he's running against Ellison. They're like, okay. So there's an issue there. Like I said, there's shadow banning going on, and a lot more.
And Ellison's going to have name recognition. He's going to have a appeal in the respect that he's promised to hold cops accountable. And that does appeal to a certain segment of the inner city. It's just not the right segment of the inner city. It's the victims aren't going to appeal.
Exactly.
Are the victims aren't going to be find themselves drawn to that because they're over here going, yeah, you're persecuting cops, and now I can't, now I'm a victim because you
Exactly.
got the cops terrified to do their jobs because, and there again, that's not excusing bad decisions or corrupt, law enforcement, but that's a lot of what it comes down to. Laverne, by the way, since you're watching, yeah, you're going to have to come on here because I did not realize you were running for mayor. So now we're going to have to get you on to talk about that. Um, uh, Summer is upon us, which means it's almost winter. Um, what what would it look like for us to talk about putting an event together where it would be a North Side and Greater Minnesota meet and greet, where we could get people together in numbers for safety. I mean, like, it doesn't matter. No matter what, we're gonna end up with some sort of threat. It's just what it's gonna be. There's going to always be a threat.
All
But instead of just saying, "Hey, let's get 15 or 20 people from around Minnesota to show up," let's really put our heads together going forward from this point. Me, you, Laverne, whoever else,
I'm
and
with
and do a meet and greet where we're,
you.
look, if Antifa and the new Black Panthers and the new Black Liberation Army can get together and shut down a street illegally to protest and scream and yell, I don't know why we can't shut down 2 or 3 blocks for a massive block party and a barbecue to get greater Minnesota folks in to meet with people from the inner cities on the north side to find out, like, guess what, we're all human beings and we all have the same shared values. what
Absolutely.
what what kind of time frame would we need to pull something like that together?
Um, a couple weeks maybe. You know, Northsiders, you give Northsiders 3-4 days and they'll pull something together. They'll make something out of nothing. But for the sake of greater Minnesota, I'd say, 3-4 weeks.
Well, you got to give some of the people, and some white folk got to take a long time to think about things, and figure out how to use their GPS to get. I'm driving to Dennis's place and parking there, so my car it'd probably be better off if they did burn it. But anyway, but why don't we get a little chat group going off of here, where we can start trying to put it together, get an idea of what it would look like to put something like that together on a Saturday. I'm stalling a little bit because OG Snoop said he wants to ask a question, so I want to see what he wants to ask you. But why don't we put that together where we start to have that serious conversation? Obviously, it's not going to be June, but and it might take us a little bit longer to really formulate it and come up with a plan, because I don't want the first time we try to get a bunch of people together to be, oh, let's go, all we're going to do is work, but maybe
Right.
turn it into a meet and greet where we can say, now you know who it is you're working with, and what
Right.
you guys are, and what your common goals are,
Right.
so that greater Minnesota can see inner city Minnesota and say, look, we're all human beings, we all have these shared values. Now let's plan these neighborhood get-togethers where we go out and we make a day of cleaning up the streets and cleaning up the graffiti and walking around and spending our money in these neighborhoods, and then also making those connections of, like, hey, you hop in your car and you come down to the Rochester area or south of Rochester or Albert Lee or Laverne or whatever, or whatever it is, way out in the boonies. So you can
Yep.
come up and experience my slice of heaven, and where I've experienced your slice of heaven. And because I think the first time that something like that happens, it's got to be social.
Absolutely. 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 I completely agree. We've had plenty of meetings where we thought, there were first meetings where we thought we were going to be on one track, and all we ended up doing was really getting to know one another, talking. And that's how you build that relationship, that, it's trust, but it's not trust. It's community trust, just
Mm-hmm.
letting people know that we're all the same and supporting one Minnesota. Isn't that somebody's campaign slogan? That they're not really wasn't that Walsh's campaign slogan? Something
Well,
like that.
wasn't it during the Coof stuff? Wasn't it when
Yeah,
together apart or something?
something like that. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't.
but we need to do it, and we can show people our conservative values and how much we have in common. Even if they're not Republicans, they can be Democrats. That's okay. You just don't have to vote blue all the time. So it's just things like that. Just we got to start showing that we're not going for that division anymore. Because no one wants it. I can tell you the majority of Minneapolis is tired of hearing it. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
tired of it. We're ready to move on. We want to move on. So that's that. It's time for that. And like I said, it's going to take people to step out of their comfort zone, and do things that they might not normally do. But once you get there, I can promise you're going to feel really good about it.
OG Snoop got his question together, and he starts off here with a super chat, and he says, "I sent my email. How bad are things right now when compared to 10 or so years ago in the metro?" That's kind of the first part of the question. What would you say is the answer to that?
Um, 10 years ago, I would say honestly, 2007 to 2008 was probably a real low point as far as crime. I think there might have been maybe 13 murders that year, those 2 years. Somewhere around there. Right before the recession. Um, so from 10 years ago till now, I was there during the Murderopolis thing.
Everybody's forgotten Murderapolis, by the way.
Yeah, this is worse than Murderopolis. Way
Mhm.
worse than Murderopolis.
So it's gotten proportionately worse.
Oh gosh, yeah. Murderopolis, I think there was like maybe 2 or 3 carjackings during that whole escapade. Through those whole 2, 3, 4 years or whatever it
Yeah,
was.
now you get that in a day.
Easily. It was
Easily.
an hour. So way worse. Now you got the and I want to talk about these Glock switches that the left doesn't want to talk about. We got fully automatics running around the neighborhood. They're dumping 30 rounds in less than a half a second.
No, that's impossible. That's illegal.
So
the law doesn't allow that. You
Oh,
are that's illegal, Brian. That can't possibly be happening because gun laws work. Gun laws work.
and I want to give a shout out to Crime Watch because they've been screaming about this.
You got connections with Crime Watch. I tell Crime Watch I want to have Crime Watch on, even if they want to be anonymous. I can manage that, but I want Crime Watch on here.
Absolutely, not a problem. I'll definitely deliver that one. But what are violence interventionists against fully automatic weapons? And it's not like it's just one guy. They're jumping off the car 4 or 5 deep. I don't know if you've heard any
right.
of this audio. Crazy.
So OG sent an email with a longer part of the question. He goes, I was there for the riots, but more importantly, I was there in the aftermath and prior left-wing protests, that's something we have to understand. The riots kicked off ostensibly based on the death of George Floyd. We understand where that came from, but it really kicked off because I'm sick and tired of hearing that it was a bunch of white supremacists who came in and started that. That was not what happened. It was leftist agitators like Antifa and others. I'm not saying that the black community in the area didn't have its own thing going on too, but it was predominantly the riots. And by my estimation, from the work I've done looking into it, started because of left-wing agitators.
Absolutely.
But anyway, there was a disproportional amount of people from foreign backgrounds, both from out of country and out of state, and that's what I was getting at. Is I believe that to be the case. There are certain segments of the community whose lifestyle prior to being here lent them a propensity to coming along and taking part in violence that other people native to the area would not have taken part in.
Absolutely.
Do you see that as a reality?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Absolutely.
Whether it be guys coming from Chicago or Milwaukee, or maybe a particular segment of the society that might have come from a place like Somalia or something like that.
We had, I seen a lot of Portland. Of course, Portland was here.
Yep. That's that foreign American element that comes in. Portland bust a bunch of white Antifa people in for that.
Yeah. Portland was here big time. There was I was, I was on different feeds and I was hearing, where there's 20 people, 30 people that were staying using somebody's house as a safe house, Antifa, where they're all from out of town and this and that.
Same thing with the new Black Panthers. They bust in, and the new Black Liberation Army, which had virtually no presence in the inner city that I'm aware of Minneapolis until George Floyd's death and the following riots.
They definitely came. They definitely didn't have a real presence here until the unrest. I've interacted with them a little bit. I've never actually had an issue with those guys, but granted, they are conservatives, so we kind of have that in common. So I always try to meet on common ground with people.
So you see them as being more conservative because their roots are right out of well, this is me being a nerd now. The new the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army roots come straight out of the Marxist. You'd have to read The Days of Rage if you haven't yet. I think that book would be right up your alley because their founders were like literally trained in Angolan communist uh, agitator camps, like literally.
Yeah. It's different. It's different. Yeah, they're definitely conservatives.
Okay, well I don't know who Charles. You know who Charles Neal is?
Yes, I do. Chaz Neal. Yep.
Oh, that's Chaz.
Yep.
Chaz doesn't like me. He has a beef with somebody, and I've never had a beef with him, but I don't think he likes me. I've tried to get him to have his beef out with this person we both know. Says it's not being conservatives; it's about Black nationalism. Do you see that as maybe more of an accurate statement, that it's less about? Is this the Chaz from Red Wing area?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, because as long as we don't have, I didn't have a beef. I thought he had a beef. All right, good. I'm glad we don't have a beef. So the reason why I push back on that is because of what I know about the history of the group. The history of those two groups does come from a very much a leftist Black nationalist perspective, which does oftentimes present itself as conservative, but I personally don't, any nationalist movement where it's for me, ethnically identified, either Black nationalism, white nationalism, Chinese nationalism, whatever it might be. I struggle with considering that to be a traditional conservative movement,
Right.
Because it becomes too identified with the ethnicity.
Right.
Which borders. Does that make sense? I'm not challenging you. I'm trying to understand it because they don't. White nationalists have conservative values, allegedly, but they won't affiliate with conservatives who don't share their white nationalism, and they definitely won't affiliate with Black nationalists. Where,
I would say, I guess there's probably not too much of a dividing line when it comes to that, just because when the core values of what I guess the fight is about, the constitutionality of it all, just the fair playing field,
yeah, absolutely. Thank you for saying fair, not equitable.
Exactly. It's a fair, everybody gets the same shot. And that's the one part about conservatism that everybody's got in common. That's all. No, not this person up here, and let's hand this person over here. Everybody.
So you're thinking more of a traditional values sense, where family values, because I do know that that there are segments of those two organizations, those two groups that are definitely much like, no, we're going to recapture the black family. We're going to reestablish the black family. And they come down hard on people like get off welfare, you know,
Yes, absolutely.
which
Absolutely.
I agree with, but because I also understand that, and this is for me. And so here's a radical side of me. Like what Chaz just said. So being a black man, Brian, how do you feel about the way Juneteenth is prophetized? Um, I'm gonna look. I look at something like that, and I say we we celebrate Juneteenth. Now, I said the other day, I'm like, if you want to celebrate Juneteenth, please do. But my beef with Juneteenth is we fought this civil war ostensibly right to free the black man in this nation, in this republic, and all we ended up doing with the fighting of the civil war is instead of freeing the black slave is we placed the entire population of the United States under the yoke of slavery to the federal government, be it ran by Democrats or Republicans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now we have white leftists propagating the idea that we have to celebrate Juneteenth as a national independence day to placate, in my opinion, placate the black voice into feeling like they've accomplished something when really all that's happened is we're now still all under the yoke of slavery, whether it be enslaved to a system of social welfare or enslaved to the idea that we have to be at odds with one another because of the variance in our skin color, because there'll be people out there saying you and I shouldn't be able to have this conversation.
Right. Right. When it
That
comes
to me
to
is slavery.
absolutely, oppression, any kind of oppression, basically these days is a form of slavery. But I guess to answer the question as far as Juneteenth, the fact that it's a national holiday, I guess for me personally, um, I don't have a personal opinion about it. If it was a national holiday or if it wasn't recognized a national holiday, um, I definitely think that I mean a lot of people did not know what Juneteenth was before 2020. They had no clue,
White,
no clue.
black, Asian, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. A lot of people, yeah.
Yeah, no, had no clue. So that was kind of an event in a day, um, in the black communities that was normally it was celebrated, but not the way it is now. It was, it was different then. It seemed like it was a better form of celebration because it wasn't glorified. Because I guess for me, if it took that long, 2-3 years later to get all the slaves freed, there's nothing really to celebrate about that. For me personally, but then again, understand that I've lived in Arkansas for a few years after high school, so I got a little bit different viewpoint on that. It's actually it was a celebration. It's a celebration. It used to be a celebration of freedom, but not necessarily independence. I would say calling it independence would be incorrect. Where it was more like a celebration from the way that I have celebrated in the past growing up young. It was a celebration of being free and actually being able to get a piece of the pie, of the American pie. You know what I mean? But definitely, I definitely we never celebrated it as an Independence Day. Um, more or less just a day of reflection, if anything. Being thankful, like almost like another Thanksgiving. But the fact that people and companies are trying to monopolize it on it, I can't stand that fact because it's like Hallmark card trying to get
But
a hold of it.
it's the same thing. I look around. I don't care what the situation is. It's when it the social media accounts of um groups like or not groups but businesses like Amazon and everything else, when they put up the blackout square on their social media, they're not doing it because they give a damn about the black community. They're
No,
doing it because they want the dollars of the black community. That's it.
absolutely,
That's it.
absolutely. That's
It's
it.
it's when they put up Latinx over Latino or Latina stuff. Like, they're not doing it because they give a damn about the Latino or Latina community, the
It's all about
Hispanic community. It's all about the almighty bucks. And
exactly.
that's what really gets me. And so I think, we've got, Chaz is saying some stuff that I 100%, even trademarking a Juneteenth flavor and plate banners. Like,
Yep,
seriously, it's
yep,
all it's just it's money making, and it's pandering is what it is. It's pandering.
absolutely,
Like,
absolutely.
it, and he even said too that he believes, and this is what I like this idea. I believe 1776 and 1863 and 1920 should all be national holidays. I don't have a beef with that.
Yep,
I actually think that that's wonderful. I, these major milestones, and I said this to somebody in a conversation the other day. Like, 1776 wasn't perfect,
right,
because
right.
we came out of 1776. There were still people enslaved in the United States, white and black people
Yep,
that were enslaved at the end of the war for independence.
yep,
But the framework that ultimately led to the freedom, if you will, I think there's still a lot of slavery happening for the majority of people in this country now,
absolutely.
enslaved to a system.
Yep,
Um, that that framework was there, and that's what we should all be aiming at.
yes,
Is not the imperfections that were there, but the perfection of what is the
yes,
Constitution of this republic.
yes,
And in recognizing that there are going to be flaws, because we are fallen people. we
right,
are we are sinful people, and we do have a fallen nature. And there, so we're going to make bad decisions. Sometimes they're going to be wicked, sometimes they're going to be stupid, sometimes they're going to be sinful, but we can unite on the principles of what would make this republic great if we could get past the freaking infighting, and get past them dividing us.
yes,
And that's why I've been reaching out with my Libertarian Lowdown series to libertarian, conservative, constitutionally conservative libertarians like Travis Bull Johnson, and others around the country and here in the state of Minnesota, reaching across an aisle to people that I can work with, or finding those disenfranchised Democrat voters who maybe have traditional values and are
yes,
tired of being betrayed. Like, I'm gonna say this over and over and over again to my traditionally minded black friends. I do this constantly. You've been voting DFL for how long? You've been voting Democrat for how long? What has it gotten you?
yep,
A holiday?
yep,
But are you any less oppressed
yep,
by the system than you were than your ancestors were? Maybe you're not being forced out into a field, but you're forced into poverty a lot of times.
yep,
Look at the inner cities.
yep, yep. They're
You really
trying to
want to
force
be
it
taken
on
care
us.
of cradle to grave? Is that what you want?
Exactly, exactly. You know, exactly. That's it. So there's, like I said, there's definitely common ground. Um, obviously, and that's what we need to aim at. And if we can find common ground like this, especially between greater Minnesota and the
And
inner
that's what I
city,
want. That's what I want to do.
that would be amazing. Now, our political parties have to rearrange their line of thinking, completely have to arrange their line of thinking. And then they're going to have to really come down and sit to the table with us, because the normal narratives are not going to work. They don't work now, honestly. So if we can get that going, and if we can get that, I mean, that would, like, literally, that would have people probably getting into politics a lot more, because they know that their voice is actually being heard.
Imagine us putting something together and getting Matt Burke and Scott Jensen to actually show up to a Northside inner city event and not be the speakers.
Yes, very doable, very easily doable, very easily doable.
But just you're going to come down here, but you're not going to be the speakers.
Yep, absolutely. Got to listen.
You're going to listen.
Yep, you have to. I mean, how do you can't
Could you
run for an office and not know what your people are feeling, especially coming from where there's so many. Hennepin County, it's got the most voters out of all the counties. You know, that's half your vote. I think was like almost 800,000 voters out of Hennepin County, something like that. That's a big number.
But imagine if somebody like me and you and Laverne were to stand on a stage at an event like that and say, we're here to listen, and every one of these people that you see out there with the table, not one of them is going to ask you for money today. Not one of them is going to ask you to put a bumper sticker on your car. Not one of them is going to ask you to put a sign in your yard. We're just here to promise you that they're going to listen. They're going to tell, and the ones who don't want to do it are going to get called out.
Yep, absolutely. I think honestly, TC, I think it's long overdue.
Then let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Absolutely.
If they want to ignore us, it'll be to their detriment.
Absolutely.
And I'll invite Democrats.
Absolutely. Yep. Sure will.
And we'll make them have tables next to each other.
Yep.
We're going to put Governor Walz's table right next to Scott Jensen's table.
Yep.
And we're going to put Laverne's table right next to Pretty Boy Fry.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm being a little facetious right now, but let's do it. And nothing about donations.
Nope.
Nothing about bumper stickers, nothing about yard signs. Here's my contact information. If we walk away from this and you want to do that, then you can, but I am not asking you for a dime today, and I am not going to give you a speech. I'm going to listen, and I'm going to answer questions.
Absolutely.
And then we do let them get up on the stage, but we put them up there, and we control the mic, and we make them answer questions.
Yep. I like it.
Let's do that.
Absolutely.
I'm going to have to lean on you and Laverne because I don't know anything about organizing up there. I could put together.
Not a problem. I can guarantee you people are probably having conversations right now trying to make it happen. You know, I can guarantee you that. We will definitely make that happen. Absolutely. That would be
and I will find a way to get there.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's definitely work on that. I mean, that's like I'm getting happy now. I'm getting excited.
Oh, wait. OG asked a question. I meant to get to the rest of it. So, but we just got sidetracked. He noted like you had said, there are people from outside of Minnesota and outside the Twin Cities, both actual foreigners and foreigners from other states. I know not all the foreigners have bad intentions, but how do you address the obvious bad intentions from those who are foreign disproportionately to your local community? Do you think that's a reality? Here's my thought, and then I'll let you correct me. Here's what we're dealing with. Let's say we're dealing with an Ilhan Omar, who I don't believe has the best interests of her district at heart. I really don't believe she does. Right. But Ilhan Omar, part of the problem is Ilhan Omar doesn't have an American ethic. Ilhan Omar has a foreign ethic, which happens to be Somalian. Somalia's ethic, not that it's in and of itself bad, because they were the closest to a libertarian nation this world has ever seen prior to the United States interfering over there and determining that we were going to give them democracy. but they don't have they do not have a constitutional mindset. They don't have that American Republican, not as in the party, but as that Republican ideal. So Ilhan doesn't have those values. So a lot of times, in my perspective, what I see is not that they have a hostility in like, oh, we hate America. It's just they've brought their value and their ethic, and even the ones who have come here and have been born here are still raised in a a elder ran system that does not understand the American way of life.
You know, there I would definitely say there.
That's
I would
that's
definitely agree with
part of
you.
my
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you. I know that part of the community, they're definitely going through a shift too, where the younger generation is kind of got a little bit more a hold as of leadership. Um like I got AJ Wood, who actually ran for mayor. He actually came out and did a cleanup. Um so I got a chance to spend the day with him, and we were talking. Um and that community, that part of the community actually probably needs more support than anybody.
There is a
Because
conservative, traditional conservative, like American conservatism base rising up within the Somali community.
absolutely.
I have run into them, and they're like, "Oh no, I'm a Republican."
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
really? And we're seeing them run for office.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know plenty of them, plenty good guys that I've known for years, and we talk about this all the time. Um, but they're being oppressed. And they've had demonstrations and protests about it, but you never heard or seen anything about it. And in my opinion, and it kind of comes back to Ian Omar, one of her main supporters, who's also the biggest slumlord in Minneapolis, who I don't know why he's not in Fed jail right now. I have no idea, but I mean, he's a crook. He's a mob. If I had a chance, I'd probably flex cuff him myself and drag him down the county and let him deal with him. I don't care. Like he does. Like I don't understand it. But he owns the majority of the buildings that part of the community stays in. So when you want to start talking about ballot harvesting, it's pretty easy to do when people don't want to lose their homes. So that's a whole nother issue that needs to be addressed. Like that's there's some, yeah, that's a hot mess. And I think that's kind of got a lot of pressure on Minneapolis City Hall right now, um, because they've dealt with some land developers and some people that they probably shouldn't have. And now they're kind of boxed into a corner where you're dealing with this element that's part criminal. And guess what? Um, so now it almost feels like, honestly, I feel like there's a lot of criminal element that is running Minneapolis, because people fell for bad money. All money isn't good money. Um, Ian Omar's main supporter. Um, so I often wonder who's really calling the shots when she's talking. I honestly do. Part of me really feels like,
Well, I think that's a fair assessment, oftentimes, of any political pundit or any
yeah,
politically elected individual. Is who's calling the shots, who's in control, and so I think that's. OG wants to know if you've been down to the shrine or whatever that's been put up for George Floyd. Have you ever visited that?
oh yeah. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times when it first happened. I mean, gosh, almost on a daily basis. But you got to understand that I know so many people. I know people that live there. I have friends that live there. So I'm gonna be down there to see what's going on. I haven't been down there actually walked the memorial in over a year now. But there's a reason for that. And that's that's because MPD asked me not to go down there, which is understandable, just because of some of the things that have happened down there. Not that I have any like I could go down there, but why stir the pot? We've got Agape down there, who's doing their community activism, and like I said, they're in a turf battle, and they're probably a little bit better at handling that element than I am, because I'm kind of up to here with them, where I'm just ready to drag them all off. So that's probably why they asked me not to go back down there.
Well, I think part of the issue is there's kind of a conversation happening in the chat, and I think it's a legit one. Part of the issue is if you look at the George Floyd incident, you had something really bad happen to a really bad guy, and it was allowed to happen to a really bad guy by a bad guy. So you had a bunch of bad guys doing bad things, and bad things happened. And that in no way justifies what happened to George Floyd by any stretch of the imagination. What happened to George Floyd was uncalled for, and I believe the individual involved, by my estimation, didn't get enough time.
I would agree.
That's my take, and there are people out there in the law enforcement community who would be mad at me. Well, they've been mad at me for a lot of what I've been saying over the last few months, especially. But here's the situation. This is what we have to understand. What we have to do is we have to look at a situation like George Floyd and say to ourselves, who benefits from this? Who's benefiting from this reality? The reality is this bad things happen because bad people did some bad stuff, and I'm not doing the Ilhan Omar quote. But people capitalized on that. And we allowed them to capitalize on that. And we allowed them to cause the division that happened after that event.
Yep.
We allowed that to happen. Both the left and the right tried to capitalize on it. Period.
Yep.
Instead of saying, whoa, wait a minute, stop, let's talk, let's figure this out. Period.
Yep.
The left said, look, white man bad, cops bad.
Yep.
The right said, criminal did a bad thing, he got what he deserved, cops can't do anything wrong. And the uniparty does what it always does. It pitted us against each other and said, we're going to let you guys destroy each other so that we can stay where we are in our positions of power and comfort and act like we're doing something to help you. And there's one philosophy behind that. And this is really where I'm going to show my nerdiness here, is Antonio Gramsci talked about the long, slow trudge through the institutions. But his acolyte, Saul Alinsky, taught his people, his students, you never allow a tragedy to go to waste. You always capitalize on that. That's an Alinskyite mentality. And the right is reactionary. So the left swoops in, takes the George Floyd incident in the inner city of Minneapolis, capitalizes on that and says, look at how bad the white oppressive system is and how bad and oppressive the police force is, turns the people through outside agitation against the community, destroys the community, and then conservative reactionaries, white, black, Hispanic, doesn't matter, all got on board and said, look at the inner city. It's not worth salvaging. Let it burn. Let it be what it's going to be.
Yep.
That's it. That's all it was them capitalizing on a very bad situation to keep us divided.
Yep.
And what they hate are these kind of conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is the last thing that they wanted. The last thing. The last thing.
I was on my soapbox. Sorry.
But you're completely right though. Like you're completely right. um it's a shame. But that's what we gotta fix. Just like Chaz, I know he said it like we need to sit down at the table. And I'm like, yeah, everybody says we're all saying the same thing. And it's amazing how hard it is to sit down at this table. Because every time we build this table, somebody wants to break it. But we'll keep on going. And we're gonna make it happen regardless. The fact that we're at this point now is a beautiful thing. We're talking the fact that Chaz was able to chime in and put get his what he wanted to ask, his questions, whatever, that's what it's about. Finding common points and being able to talk and get down to what the core problem is. So we can move forward, so we can have regular politics about which are we going to build a playground equipment first, or are we going to build the basketball court first? No, that's the kind of politics we should be talking about. What's going on now? It's not doing anything. This division, we're not getting anywhere. It's purposeful division. You can see it's purposeful. The whole 2A gun rights thing. I mean, you could tell that was just out of the wall, pull it out of thin air. Let's go for it. And it's just more division on top of division. And I'm wondering, so what's the next event that they're going to try to use to divide us with? Because it's been about a week now, so something else has got to be around the corner.
Marie says, I'm also sick of these suburbanites telling us what they're going to do with our city. Exactly. This is, there again, suburbanites, the left and the right. You have Tim Walz telling Greater Minnesota, the rocks and cows, that they don't matter, that their voice doesn't matter, but also showing up and pandering to the inner city and talking about how, oh, we're going to do this for you and we're going to do that for you, because you can't do it for yourself. Right. You have Republicans talking about ending the Met Council, and I know I've already brought this up. We're going to end the Met Council. What freaking good does that do the inner city? What's the inner city care about the Met Council? Because the Met Council doesn't care about anything other than growing the Met Council.
Yep.
And all that does is increase the suburbanite influence. That's it.
Yep.
That's it.
The Met Council does like to that right now the Met Council, everybody's hot about that the blue line, the way they want to run the blue line right up through Broadway. So that's kind of the big deal right now. That's probably what's got the inner city hot at the Met Council. So if the Conservative Party was going to take a shot at them, they probably might want to do that. But then again, to understand why the inner city is upset with the Met Council, you got to come talk to them, which isn't happening.
Right. But that's my point, is that, like, so you've got one group that wants to grow the Met Council, which does nothing for the inner city, and another group that's talking about disbanding the Met Council, which doesn't do anything for the inner city or for Greater Minnesota. The Met Council doesn't have any effect on my life. What do I care whether or not the governor wants to disband the Met Council or grow the Met Council? What I want to know is, what are you going to do to rebuild this freaking state? What are you going to do to rebuild a state so that there's finally freaking unity here? Because we're not a state full of leftists, and we're not a state full of white nationalists. Exactly. We're not. We're a state of traditionally conservative people who maybe have some various ideas on certain things, but for the most part, we share the same values, and we're allowing them to continue to separate us, so that now you've got people who live in Greater Minnesota who have been told you better not go to the Twin Cities because it's not safe. Right. And they want that message out there, because if they can keep us from talking to each other, if they can keep us from meeting up with one another, they can keep us divided, and they can keep the inner city voting for the left, and they can keep Greater Minnesota from doing what's good for the entire state. And what's really happening is they're dividing us even more, and we're allowing it to happen. And we just, right. Tim Walz doesn't need Greater Minnesota to win. He just needs the inner city.
Yep, exactly.
Well, I want to take the inner city away from Tim Walz, because Tim Walz has not done a damn thing for the inner city.
Nothing.
I want people to understand this. The guy who shut down small businesses, the guy who closed down your mom and pop shops, the guy who told you that you couldn't leave your house, the guy who did all of that, the guy who told you you had to cover your face and wanted to weaponize law enforcement to do that, couldn't activate law enforcement from around the state or the National Guard to save your freaking neighborhoods. This is the person you want to vote for? And he's counting on it, which is why he won't show up into your neighborhoods, because he thinks he has the inner city, especially the black vote, locked
Yep.
up.
Yep.
That's why they want to keep us separate.
Yep, exactly. And that's, I mean, that's the definition of oppression. You know, the definition of it. And that's
I told you I'm fired up.
Yeah, trust me. I'm trying to find the words so that are okay to say on your show because I could really rant off about that. But you're completely right. I mean, you hear all the talk that's come out of his mouth. All that money, all the money that was coming into the state that was supposed to go to the inner city communities. Where is it at? Where is it at? Because I don't see it. No one else sees it. Nothing's gotten better. It's only gotten worse. So I just can't see how some of our elected leaders right now, and we know who they are really, how can they really feel that they've earned that vote? I don't know, but I think Tim Walz is going to have a big surprise this year.
Well, I don't know, Brian. I don't know that. Everybody keeps talking about it, like, but somebody said the Republicans aren't going to do anything unless we make them. And they didn't say that. I'm saying this, but they're saying the Republicans aren't going to do anything from there. They're right. They're not. But we've got to force their hand.
Exactly.
We've got to force their hand. We have got to make them realize that they don't stand a chance, but they don't care. They don't seem to care. They don't seem to care. We have to make them realize that they don't stand a chance. They don't stand a chance unless we make them notice this. But they're more worried about white suburban soccer moms driving minivans who are pissed off because it's costing them $95 to fill up their tank than they are with the people who are also suffering high gas prices and also suffering food shortages and also suffer. And oh, by the way, somebody, Chess said, if they get their Walz checks, they're going to vote for Walz. Well, guess what? Just stopping the Walz check isn't going to keep them from voting for him because they're going to spend that on you. You have got to offer them a solution. What makes you different? And if your whole thing is, I won't throw it out there that because it's not, I want to see where it goes. I'm going to wait. I'm going to give that particular candidate time to figure out how to say it right. But telling people you're going to take down the Met Council doesn't tell you what you're going to do to address these victims of crime in the inner city. You have to show up and actually take action. And like somebody said, you have got to stop being afraid. You've got to stop being afraid.
Absolutely. And I know Chaz I'm sure he knows quite a few as well. There's some people out there that we're advocating for that were victims of crime or their family members were victims of crime. And we're going to push until we get these family members and these people sitting down with politicians, regardless. It's going to happen. They're not going to run from it. They're going to have to sit down and talk to them. And that's our main goal. We need them to hear it from their mouths. We need them to see their emotions, because when they sit down with them, I guarantee you their lives are going to change. They're not going to look at it the same way. It's going to affect them. And I need them to see that. We need them to see how everybody else is living and what they have to deal with.
Both of the parties are failing all of us.
Absolutely.
If we're looking at it like, oh, they're not doing anything for rocks and cows and they're only concentrating on the inner city, or they're only concentrating on the rocks and cows and they're not doing anything for the inner city, then we're all losing. because I
Absolutely.
care about what happens to the people I know in the inner cities and in the Twin City
Absolutely.
area. And I hope that they care about what's happening to me out here.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and that's the thing, is we've got to get them to stop looking at things like that. And both parties are bad about it. They're both
Yep.
bad.
Yep.
Right now there's no such thing as the good Democrats and the bad Republicans, or the good Republicans and the bad Democrats. Is that by and large, all of they're interested in right now is helping each other stay in power. Like, it's people don't believe me because they're saying, "Oh, Scott Jensen, we're with our thing is we just have to we got to vote for Scott Jensen because all that matters is unseating Tim Walz." Well, unseating Tim Walz doesn't get Keith Ellison out of office. And let me ask this: what has Keith Ellison done for the inner city?
You know, I would say I think probably the biggest selling point that Keith had when he got that office was everybody really thought that he was going to go after the slumlords on North Side. Especially there's a couple of companies which now obviously since re-election came up, he was quick to get that lawsuit, who was against Havenbrook, I believe. We thought that was going to be his first thing he was going to take care of when he got into office. You know, it's kind of like Obama. Everybody thought Obama was going to get in there and he was going to clean Chicago up. Didn't happen. So and Keith has got some heat on him too right now. He's got some heat. His neighbors, I mean, he lives in that community. They're not happy. And he knows it.
Right, but what does Jay Schultz offer? I mean, honestly, I mean, let's look at that. What does Jay offer?
And that's a good thing. Like I said before, most people in the cities don't even know who Jim Schultz is. You know.
Oh yeah, Jim.
So
excuse me, not
still
Jay.
Trying to figure out what his plan is. And I'm trying to figure out what he's going to offer as well. And that's the thing. You know, we need candidates that have answers and that can tell us the direction that they're going in. Like I said, people ask us, "Hey, so what's Jim Schultz? What's his direction?" I don't know, honestly. You know, I got to call Laverne up. Hey, Laverne, Laverne. He'll call. Hey, Jim Schultz, get back to me, please. You know, so it's, you know, that's why I say we have lack of resources. We can't answer and we can't talk for these candidates for them. And it maybe if we had some kind of a clue on what they stood on certain things, certain aspects and the directions they want to take, but we just don't know.
Right, but isn't that ultimately one of the biggest problems that we have? And since somebody threw it out there, yeah, again, Scott Jensen's promised from the platform of the Republican Party convention that he was going to commute or pardon or whatever the term is, Kim Potter. That is the most asinine thing ever. And then you wonder why people think that Republicans are racist. So you got a white guy saying he's going to commute the sentence of a white gal who shot and killed a black guy, and then you wonder why they think the Republicans are racist. Not like I don't wonder why. I know why. It's because even when we're not, we say stupid things that sound racist.
I don't even know. Honestly, that statement to me, I've had
no, but I know no one that's demanding that. Like, I literally know no one that's I'm over here going. I had somebody go, well, she just made a mistake. I'm like, I'm sorry, you don't make that kind of mistake. And if that's the kind of mistake you make, you shouldn't be a cop.
Nope, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
That is not like. Well, I've known her for 20 plus years. My former boss, a sheriff of Olmsted County, put out a statement when she did it, and I was still working at the time before they came after me, and Kevin Torgerson said, "Well, I just want everybody to know I know Kim Potter. She's a good person." I'm not saying that Kim Potter went out there to kill a man that day, but that's not the kind of mistake that you just get to say, "Oh, oops."
Nope.
Oops.
Nope, not at all.
Oops.
Not at all.
No, that's not an oops. You like
Nope.
if that's how poor your training is, you shouldn't be a cop. And no one is I know no one demanding that she have her sentence commuted.
Yeah, I agree.
Like no one, I know no one. So why that promise?
You know, obviously there's a group of people who feel that way. And honestly, I think, and I've had conversations, and I don't know what their beef is, because it's got to be something personal or something like that, because they kind of tend to go off on a tangent and bring things in that aren't even relevant to the situation. But bottom line truth is, if you kill somebody, whether it's on accident or not, you're accountable for it.
You're accountable. Yeah, you're accountable. And like I'm the guy who watched that poor mom who made a bad decision when she parked on the side of a very busy freeway, by the way, and videoed the cops from that city on a high risk felony stop, who put a video out defending her when that cop said that she's getting I'm sure you guys have all seen it, but I did a breakdown video on my channel about that particular incident and explained everything that cop did wrong in that moment. And it was only when she said who she was.
Yep.
That he backed off, and he still was being a prick about it.
Yep.
Then we wonder why.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
but you want to know what? And I'm going to say this here in front of you because you know how I feel about this. The reason why we're so divided is because the left tells everybody you have to hate all the cops unless the cops are enforcing everything the left wants done. So cops are good when they're making you stay home and wear a mask in public.
Yep.
Or shutting down somebody exercising their Second Amendment. Cops are good then when we can send them to your house to take your guns from you. That's what the left wants.
Right.
Cops are all bad unless they're doing everything we want them to do. The right, cops can do no wrong.
Right, exactly.
And they want us to stay in that position. So that this alleged conservative Republican Party and the alleged left-leaning Democrats, and they're not alleged, they are, but the alleged conservatives are always back to blue, and the left is always all cops are bastards, and they keep everybody on either side of that. And instead of being reasonable and having someone who can come into the morass and say, no, cops can do some good, and yeah, the cops can do some bad, and even well-meaning cops can do stupid things sometimes, because as you saw with my proposal about what I think we need to do for law enforcement education,
Yep.
I think personally, yeah, it's my idea, but personally, I think it's a great idea.
Absolutely.
If anybody's interested, you can find it on my wall, and I'm going to be putting it out in other places pretty soon. I'm working with some people to try and get them to advance this as part of their ideas. What we have to do is we have to look at each other and stop saying, look, oh, well, I'm a Democrat, or I'm a Republican, I'm a leftist, or I'm a conservative. And we have to start saying we're American citizens. We're all in this together, and we need to do what's best for all of us.
Yep.
In the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness in this republic.
Absolutely.
And right now, the way the parties are operating, none of us are benefiting from it.
Nothing.
None of us.
Nope. And we can see it. We all can see it. And these candidates need to see that we see this as well. It's gonna be rough. Like I think it's gonna come August, after coming into the generals. I think it's gonna be rough. Because I think our candidates are gonna start hearing from people. And if candidates sit there and put out the wrong messaging, it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be pretty. I can see people getting upset. I can see rallies happening. I can see it coming. Not to the extent like 2020, by no means, but this is gonna. I see it more of out of frustration. I mean, people are already starting to have rallies, just for victims, crime victims, and different things. These are all core principles that everybody has, that everybody's starting to agree on, and wondering why our government can't see what's going on, why no one's giving representation when everybody's asking for representation. Where are our reps at? What are they doing? I don't know. But like I said, people are getting frustrated. I'm one of them. If we have candidates who think that they're going to run, and I'm thinking about a certain party, and thinking that they're going to do good with all the crazy stuff that they're pulling, we're going to pull the plug on that campaign. You can still, you're not that we're going to do anything physically to stop you, but we're going to completely ignore you. We can shadow ban you. We can do all kinds of stuff to take you right off the map. We have our constitutional rights that allow us to voice our opinion, to be able to protest and whatnot. And fact of the matter is, if we see something that isn't legal, or unethical by a campaign, you damn right we're going to call it out and stand by it. Not playing games on that. So if people think that it's just a small issue, just ignore it. Ignore it if you want to. We're talking and we're planning, and you do not want to be an unethical candidate at this point in time. We will call you out on it in the worst ways. And that's just what everybody, and this goes for both sides. We've done it to both sides. I've done it to both sides, and I'm going to continue to do it to both sides. And the more organized we get, the more groups that we network with, we won't even have to worry about it, because, like I said, we'll start just, putting them on that list. We're like, okay, that's the junk list. We don't got to worry about them. And they're not going to get any support. And that's pretty much where I believe that we're coming down to in the metro right now. And that's why we're getting people like Chaz coming in, because we're ready to talk. Everybody wants to network. But it's time. It's time, TC. It's time.
So we've been on for 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yes,
I didn't think it was going to be you probably realize if you watched any of my stuff, I could talk forever.
Yeah, me too.
But I think this has been a productive conversation. So here's what I want to, here's what I want to, I'm serious. We need to put an event together, and I mean, it needs to be a big event.
Absolutely.
And I'm not, I am a constitutional conservative. Yes, I have libertarian leanings. But what I want to do is, I want this to be open to people who are homeless right now,
Right.
about where they're at on the political spectrum.
Absolutely.
Wherever you are on the political spectrum, if you consider yourself a homeless Democrat, if you consider yourself a homeless Republican, if you consider yourself a conservative Republican, or maybe a little left of center Democrat, but you're over here watching that party abandon you, or you're watching the Republican Party abandon you, whatever, we can still come together, pick the best candidates, force the candidates to do what we want, because that's the thing. They're supposed to serve us.
Yes, absolutely.
So no more elected officials. They're not officials. They're servants. They're elected and appointed servants. Period.
Absolutely.
End of story. And we need to remind them of that. And when we remind them of that, the way to remind them of that is to make them sit down or be in the midst of the people that they serve, not giving speeches, not campaigning, making them ask questions. And when they try to give stump answers, you say, no, I didn't ask you for what the pie in the sky thing that you're going to do. What are you actually going to do to change things? And if you can't give us an answer, then you're not prepared to be in office.
Absolutely.
I can't do much by way of organizing from here, but I can promote an event. I can encourage others to go, and I will do that. But if you and Laverne and others are willing to put an event on to get a space for us, and we can share that platform as co-host of a meet and greet between greater Minnesota and the inner city and bring candidates from whatever party in
Absolutely.
and make them listen. You're not here. Like I said, you're not asking for donations. You're not asking to put yard signs up. You're here to listen to the people. And anybody who doesn't come gets blasted.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Absolutely.
If you guys can make that happen, then you guys make that happen, and I will promote the crap out of it.
Absolutely. We'll get a group chat started here. I'll get on the horn with Laverne as soon as I get off the phone here with you, and we'll get rolling on it immediately. Absolutely, TC. Let's do it.
You know how to reach out to me, and
yep.
And I'm 100% serious, brother. I
Absolutely.
will come up there and I will stand on a stage or a platform or whatever next to you. I will help you moderate. I will help you encourage whatever it is, and I will promote it. And I have enough of a following that I know I can get people to show up.
Perfect. Because I know people will show up in the cities, and like I said, they will reciprocate. And that's what needs to happen. It has to be a two-way street. And I know they'd be more than happy to do that. They'd be more than happy to get out of the cities for a day or so and take a little vacation, come out and see what's going on in Rocks and Cows. So yeah, I definitely think we should we'll start working on that, and hopefully here by the end of the week we might even have I guarantee we'll have a date mapped out here probably within the next 2 or 3 days, and we'll be able to kind of move forward off of that. So definitely within the next couple of days I'll have some information for you.
Yep, let's get that going.
Absolutely.
And then tell Dennis he's obligated to be there.
Perfect.
Brother, you get out of here. I'm gonna do my close, and we'll stay in touch. Laverne, if you're still watching, you're next.
All right, I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on. Everybody out there, you have a great night. Stay blessed.
Thanks for your time, Brian. God bless, brother.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, guys. I know it's been a long conversation. Laverne is on open and genuine invite. I'd love to have you on to talk about running for mayor. But more than anything, let's make this meet and greet happen. Here's the thing, folks. If you aren't subscribed to my channel, please do. If you are subscribed, please like this and share this. If you like what we've had to say in this, please take part in the conversation. But please make sure you're sharing this around for everybody in the chat that's been watching. Chaz, Tim, Laverne. There are plenty of places I guarantee you that we have some differences. All of us. Not one of us is lockstep with the other. Not one of us is 100% in line with where the other one is at. But it is high time that we be the people, and that we start being neighbors again. That's the big thing. We need to start being neighbors again. And by being neighbors, I'm not talking about the particular neighborhood we live in. Damn it, I want my neighbors to be from all over the state. And I want what's best for all of us. I want what's best for all of us. And right now, the way it feels to TC, the way it feels to me, is I don't feel like I have any representation anywhere in this state. Nobody's looking out for me and the people that I care about. And if that's me, I know that they're not caring about you where you're at. That's just what it is. All we are numbers to them. We're either a number for a vote or we're a number for a tax purpose. That's it. You're one or the other. Please check out my friends over at Arden Sales. I'm not going to put their video up on this one. We've been on here long enough, but please go over to ardensales.com if you happen to be the kind of person has a little bit of extra cash laying around and you you like to golf and you like to do indoor or shooting sports, and you'd like to have a way to practice those things year round in your home here in Minnesota, and there's a way to make that happen, go check them out. They are good friends of the show, and they are staunchly constitutional, and that's why I talk about them. And I also have another good friend, Laura Rear. She is a RN, she is a nurse practitioner, and she also has her doctorate. And she practices telemed in Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota. And she is about medical freedom. She wants you to have informed consent, and she wants you to make your own decisions about medicine for you based on what's best for you, not based on a mandate or anything else. That's what she wants. Her name is Laura Rear, Rocky Mountain Health and Healing. Rocky Mountain Health and Healing. Please go check her out, because she needs your business, because she was forced out for not towing the line when it came to a certain virus that was going around here, and they forced her out for that. So Rocky Mountain Health and Healing, tell her when you contact her that TC sent you, and she is phenomenal, and she cares about her patients. I can't say it enough. I am 100% serious about us having an event. Rocks and Cows goes downtown. That's what I'm thinking we should call it. Rocks and Cows goes downtown. Let's scare the living crap out of both parties and unite. Stop letting them play us off against each other. Rocks and Cows goes downtown. Right? That's what we need. Once again, like, comment, and share. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe now. Share this out for the love of Pete so people can hear we have an action plan and we are willing to move. And as always, fight for your liberty. Fight for your pursuit of happiness. Fight for your life. And sic semper tyrannis.
We are go for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.